It's a strange time to be a Tomb Raider fan. On one hand, we've recently gotten amazing remasters of the series' first 6 games, but on the other, there's been next to no news about the new mainline title that promises to unify all of Lara Croft's previous incarnations and adventures. Tomb Raider 12 will undoubtedly be the biggest game in the franchise to date, but we know almost nothing about it after 6 years of radio silence from its developer, Crystal Dynamics. So what should the next Tomb Raider game be like? For a franchise in the double digits, should it go back to its roots or stick with the formula that's responsible for its modern success? Today, I want to talk about some of the problems Crystal Dynamics may face with Tomb Raider 12 and what I'd like to see in the next game. From a confident Lara Croft to a return to linear game design, and finally, a globe-trotting story that takes Lara all around the world. This is the future of Tomb Raider. To map out my Tomb Raider 12 wishlist, let's break things down into categories, each discussing a different aspect of the game. The first of which is arguably the most important, Lara Croft herself. I did a video last year discussing how fragmented she has become with so many unique portrayals, my least favorite being the last one in the new Netflix anime. There's always debates about what Lara should behave like and look like, so what Lara do I want to see in the next game? Well, first off, I want Lara to be an anti-hero again. Over the years, Lara Croft has shifted away from being a chaotic neutral character whose interests were her own, which has made her more grounded, but also less cool. I'm a fan of the Survivor trilogy, but after 10 years of this Lara, I'm just kind of bored. Making her an anti-hero again would fundamentally change the framing of her adventures by giving her agency in the treasures she wants to pursue. I'm significantly more interested in a game where Lara is confident and in control of what she wants to go after than one where she's still doing things to save the world or resolve family matters. On that note, whatever Lara they end up going with should never mention her father or mother again. Ever since the Angelina Jolie film, almost all of Lara's adventures have been influenced by her family. While I think that worked well enough for Legend and Underworld, it got very tiring in Rise and Shadow, despite Shadow doing some interesting things with Lara's childhood. I just don't care about Lara's family anymore since it's been explored to death, and I don't want it to be the basis for her motivations. But that doesn't mean you erase all of Survivor Lara. I don't think that would be fair to fans who prefer her or started with those games. One of the things they should take from that version of the character is how she displays her passion for archaeology. I want Lara in Tomb Raider 12 to be sassy and posh, but also eager to articulate granular details about the artifacts she collects. One of the best parts of Shadow was Lara narrating the history of every collectible. I think this is how one would begin to find a middle ground between classic/LAU Lara and Survivor Lara in terms of personality. Ditch the family drama and all the trauma, but still showcase Lara's affinity for the archaeological. Equally important as Lara's personality in TR12 is what she looks like. I'm personally not very happy with what they've shown of unified Lara in cameos and key art from Crystal Dynamics, and I couldn't put my finger on why until I saw a comparison of character designs from Marvel Rivals and Crystal Dynamics' own Avengers game. There's a lot to unpack here. The most obvious difference between them is their stylization, right? One is stylized and the other isn't, but that's not the core of the issue. The real problem is that Crystal Dynamics are slaves to practicality. Their character designs are entirely beholden to things that make sense in reality. Even before the Avengers game, this could be seen in Rise of the Tomb Raider. The changes in Lara's look and proportions in Rise weren't random. They were done to make her more human. But I don't think that'll work for a version of the character that's meant to be larger than life. And you can see why in the Avengers. Because Crystal Dynamics refused to make their designs even the tiniest bit impractical or unrealistic in order to stylize them, the Avengers just look like cosplayers. I fear that they're currently doing the same thing to Lara Croft right now. The reason unified Lara might look like she's cosplaying classic or LAU Lara is because unified Lara just looks like a normal person wearing something close to Lara's clothing. You may ask how someone this fit would be considered normal, but what I mean by normal is that you couldn't identify this person by just their silhouette, because what stands out about their body is only seen in values and not proportion. There was nothing wrong with how Lara looked before. The stylization may not have been practical or realistic, but it made the character unique. The reason that people dislike redesigns like this is because it makes characters look uninteresting, and the rationale behind it is largely nonsensical. For Tomb Raider 12, I'd like to see an evolution of the design from Underworld, which I always thought was the perfect fusion between Lara's classic attributes and a dash of realism. I also want to see her acrobatics return. It's an integral part of the character and would be notably absent in a unified version of her. Before we move on to the next category, one more thing on this subject. This unified design has a weird amalgamation going on in her upper torso. They took the undershirt from Legend, the strap from Underworld, and the necklace from 2013 and just stuck it on her, and I think it's unnecessarily cluttered. What I'd like to see for unified Lara is them just picking one of these things, preferably the necklace. I've always disliked the strap across the chest, and I don't see the point of the undershirt, but the necklace has a great design and color that really stands out. Moving on, the next category on this wish list is gameplay. By the time Tomb Raider 12 releases, the franchise will have been around for 30 years. There's been 3 major eras of Tomb Raider, and they've all had their own gameplay. So for Tomb Raider 12, I'm hoping for a big departure from the hub-based systems of the Survivor trilogy. Rumors suggest that Tomb Raider 12 could be an open-world game, and I'm not sure that's the direction the franchise should take for numerous reasons. What Tomb Raider has always excelled at, and what I think is at the heart of its gameplay, even across 3 different trilogies, is traversal-based platforming. Of course, the platforming has changed in terms of both maneuverability and difficulty across the franchise, but what you always do with Lara in Tomb Raider games is figure out how to go from point A to point B. An open world game seems to fly in the face of that design ideology because most of the map in an open world game is meant to be traversed freely and without obstacle. Even with some sort of vehicle, you'd spend most of your time just driving to destinations, and I'm not sure that fits with what people want to do in a Tomb Raider game. Sure, they could do something similar to what the Survivor trilogy did, which was put tombs in their own separate areas, but I would be incredibly disappointed if that's how they did world design again. It was a breath of fresh air for 2013, and Crystal Dynamics pretty much perfected it in Rise, but even the best gameplay formulas can overstay their welcome. I really don't want hub worlds or RPG light or crafting anymore. If Unified Lara is the most accomplished version of the character yet, then I want to feel empowered by the game's design, which is difficult to do with hub worlds because you always start out at your weakest in them. What I'd love for Tomb Raider 12 is a return to linearity. Personally, I don't want an artificial sense of progression with Lara anymore. With linear games, the challenge comes from level design and not a cap on what the player is capable of at that moment. Both the classic and LAU trilogies are designed like this, and the only real scaling in terms of strength are weapons that make combat easier. If we believe that Unified Lara is a Lara where all of her previous adventures happened, then it doesn't make sense for her to struggle with anything but platforming and or puzzles. Another reason I do not want an open world Tomb Raider game is because of how much time they take to make. Granted, we know that there's been an engine swap during Tomb Raider 12's development, but if it turns out that the new game is open world, then the time it's taken to develop would make a lot more sense, and I don't want to wait 4 to 5 years for new Tomb Raider games if they don't don't even have gameplay that we asked for. It seems to me that with gameplay, Crystal Dynamics' biggest challenge will be balancing what's popular and accessible with what people expect from a Tomb Raider game. Unfortunately, these things can often conflict. Case in point, open world and hub-based games make globetrotting almost impossible. You're usually stuck in one big region as opposed to several levels in different parts of the world. Most of Tomb Raider's most iconic levels are from unique areas all over the globe. Lara's adventures have always taken her everywhere, but the only game in the Survivor trilogy where that sort of happens is Rise, but even then, you're confined to mostly one place for the entire game. I want Lara to go to Egypt and Greece and Japan, but she can't if it's a game with hubs in a single big region. I can't speak for everyone, but a common sentiment I see around hub and open world games is that they can lack cohesiveness and deliberate nature in their design. We remember a lot in the classic and LAU games because we had tons of aha moments at puzzles or secrets, or it took us a long time to overcome certain platforming sections. I really want Tomb Raider 12 to lean into this and give players a tighter and more handcrafted experience similar to those in the original games. There could even be a new system to integrate side quests in linear levels. If done right, it would increase their replayability in engaging ways that don't fundamentally alter their core design. Now, Tomb Raider going back to basics doesn't mean it has to be super hard, especially because something that I want to see return from Shadow would be modular difficulty. I've never really been a fan of the type of hand-holding that Crystal's games have featured, and when Eidos Montreal made Shadow, they finally allowed players to omit things like survival instinct and white ledges if they didn't want to see or use them. On top of that, you could also alter combat and puzzle difficulty, and I think having options would be the best for everyone. Speaking of combat, that is one thing I hope returns in full form from the Survivor trilogy. I think the combat in these games is incredibly fun, but I hope they don't repeat the same issue that Shadow had, where there were just too many weapons and not enough combat encounters. One last thing about gameplay would be outfits. I think the Survivor trilogy had some of the weakest outfits in the franchise. There were some very cool ones, but most, specifically in Shadow, felt very bland. It's also sort of heinous that we never got a modern depiction of Lara's classic outfit in them. For Tomb Raider 12, in addition to old outfits returning, what I'd love would be outfits inspired by the regions that Lara is in, assuming she does go to multiple places. The outfits in older Tomb Raider games were very dependent on what Lara was doing at the time of her expedition, and it was really the Survivor trilogy that gave us themed outfits, and I'd like to see both concepts in Tomb Raider 12. So we have a Lara and we have gameplay. But what about story? Tomb Raider is a series that has evolved with time, and as games have gotten more cinematic in their presentation, so has Tomb Raider. But to fill larger stories, Tomb Raider has had a bad habit of falling back on motivating Lara through her family or saving the world, and I'm not interested in either of those things. What I want to see is Lara on a treasure hunt. Yes, that's been done before, but I also think that's generally Tomb Raider at its best. What I fear in the next Tomb Raider game is that they'll think the game has to have a big story and then fill it with side characters and plots that no one will care about. Rumors again suggest that Lara won't be alone in the next game, and if true, I think that would be a massive mistake. I really don't want to see a team or a society of Tomb Raiders. I'm not sure I even want to see more side characters join Lara on her adventures. With the more side characters and people who join Lara, the less you are able to appreciate the atmosphere of certain scenery and tombs. What really worked for those classic games was the desolation. You were mostly alone and didn't have anyone chatting in your ear. Again, I worry that Crystal Dynamics will see the prospect of a big game as reason to include as many characters as possible, which I actually think can be done because Lara needs to interact with someone to have cool character moments, but not at the expense of the gameplay. I wouldn't mind seeing Von Croy or Curtis or Amanda or even Natla again, but I also don't want the story of Tomb Raider 12 to be a greatest hits compilation. Whatever conflict they put Lara in as she looks for treasure should be something that doesn't have to depend on the past. To round out this discussion on story, I'd like to address the rumors of a Lara romance in the next game. Obviously, complete rumor that we don't know is true, but a unified Lara should not have a romance option. First off, I'm not sure I trust Crystal Dynamics to write a compelling romance, but furthermore, a romance runs into the same problem that a team would. Are we really playing Tomb Raider for a dating sim? Do we care about Lara's romantic life? In the context of a video game, me personally, not really. And I'm not sure that would be true to the character. Lara has had romances in other Tomb Raider media like the Top Cow comics, but those always end in disaster, and Lara as a character is just too detached to commit herself to a relationship. In conclusion, please don't do romance. Tomb Raider is a special franchise. Not many series can say they've lasted for 3 decades across such a dynamic medium. The potential for Tomb Raider 12 is sky high, and I'd be pretty sad if the next game wasn't both a celebration of the franchise's history and its next step forward. I can't wait for them to formally announce this game so we can all see what the future of Tomb Raider holds. Until then, thanks for watching.